The human at the royal court. The giant gates of the royal court opened with a loud sound. All the aliens in the golden hall turned their heads. Their long, sharp ears stood up in curiosity. Today was special. A human was coming. Alone. The hall was filled with nobles of the alien empire of Vorthalis. Tall, elegant beings with glowing eyes and skin like polished stone. At the front sat the mighty King Thalvor, his crown shining like a burning sun. Beside him stood his 3 daughters, Princess Arca, strong and proud, Princess Zethra, cold and intelligent, and Princess Mira, quiet and soft-spoken. Then the human walked in. He looked calm. He had no weapons, no armor, just simple Earth style, clothes and a confident smile. His name was David Hale, and he bowed deeply before the king. "Greetings, Your Majesty," he said in a clear voice. "I come in peace, as a representative of Earth." A long silence followed. Suddenly, Princess Arca laughed loudly. "That's the human? He looks like a child." Zethra smirked. "Does he even understand where he is? This is the Vorthali court, not some human market." Mira said nothing, but she looked at David curiously. David didn't reply to the insults. He only smiled and stood straight. He looked at each of the sisters, his eyes calm and steady. King Thalvor leaned forward. "Human, do you know what you've entered? This is not a place for games." "I understand," David said. "But sometimes peace is won in strange places," the nobles murmured. Some laughed. A few looked at David with new interest. David continued, "I come with words, not weapons. But Earth is ready to defend itself if needed." Arca stepped forward. "Let me test this defender." She raised her arm, calling for a guard. A large alien soldier walked forward and tossed a heavy stone disc at David's feet. "Lift it," she said with a grin. "If you can." The disc was made of dense metal and weighed over 300 pounds. No normal human could lift it. David looked at it. Then, without a word, he bent his knees and placed both hands on the disc. The room grew quiet. With a slow breath, David lifted it off the floor. His arms shook, but he raised it to his chest, and then gently placed it back down. Even Arca's smile disappeared. Zethra crossed her arms. "A trick," David said. "No trick, just training." King Thalvor studied him closely. "You are strong, but strength is not enough in my court." "I know," David replied. "Which is why I also bring respect." More whispers filled the hall. Suddenly, one of the old advisors near the throne leaned close to the king and whispered, "That's him. They call him the Quiet Storm, the one who stopped the Sharkan Wars with only 5 men." The king's eyes narrowed. "Are you that human, David Hale?" David simply bowed again. "I am only a servant of peace." Arca looked confused. You ended a war?" Zethra frowned. "He's hiding something." The king raised his hand. "Enough." He stood tall and spoke loudly to the entire court. "This human has come with no fear, no weapons, and great strength. Let us not judge too quickly." He looked at his daughters. "If you mock him, let him prove himself." David nodded. "I am ready." Then the king smiled strangely. "Then you shall face the 3 trials, strength, mind, and heart. If you pass them, you may ask for any reward." David raised an eyebrow. "Any?" "Yes," said the king. "Even the hand of a royal daughter." Gasps echoed in the chamber. Arca stepped back. "Father, you can't be serious." Zethra hissed, "This is madness." Mira lowered her eyes. She said nothing, but David only smiled again. "I accept," he said. And in that moment, even the proudest aliens in the court felt a strange chill in the air. The human wasn't just brave. He was dangerous in a way they didn't yet understand. The tests of strength, a loud roar echoed through the arena beneath the royal palace. Dust filled the air. The crowd of nobles leaned forward in excitement as the gates slowly opened. Behind the thick iron bars, a beast moved. Its breathing sounded like thunder. From the stands, Princess Arca shouted, "Let's see if the human still smiles now." David Hale stood alone in the center of the arena. No armor, no weapons, just calm eyes and steady breath. The creature stepped out. It was a thornback Brutus, an alien beast bred for battle. 8 legs, 3 rows of teeth, armor plates on its back. It had crushed war champions before. It had never lost. David looked up at the beast and whispered, "Don't make me hurt you." The crowd laughed. The king raised his hand. "Begin!" The beast roared and charged. David didn't move. Dust flew. The ground shook. Just as the Brutus lunged, David rolled sideways fast like lightning. The beast crashed into the wall, stunned. David leapt onto its back and pressed his hand to a pressure point behind its skull. The creature twitched, then collapsed, silent. The nobles gasped. David stepped down calmly and bowed to the royal seats. First test complete. Arca's face turned red with anger. Zethra crossed her arms, watching more carefully now. The king spoke again. Next trial. The mind. Inside the royal chamber, a crystal orb floated between David and an ancient alien known as the Seer of Vorthalis. The seer had long black fingers and white eyes with no pupils. Her voice was a whisper in every mind. "I will enter your thoughts. Human," she said. "No one can hide from me." She touched the orb. Silence. Her eyes twitched. Then, crack, the crystal orb shattered into glowing dust. The seer fell backward. Impossible. His mind is like a wall of fire. The king stood from his throne. "What do you mean?" "I could not enter," she said, trembling. "He has knowledge beyond this realm, and something darker." Now even Zethra stood. "No human has ever blocked the seer." David bowed again. "I've seen many wars, many minds. I choose what I let in." Whispers swept across the nobles. The king nodded. "You have passed the second trial," David asked. "And the third?" The king's eyes gleamed. "The heart, but not yours. The hearts of my daughters." Gasps. Stunned silence. David turned his head slightly. "What do you mean?" The king smiled slowly. "You will spend 1 week with each of my daughters. You may not touch them, you may not speak lies, but if any one of them chooses you with true heart, you win," Zethra shouted. "You can't be serious." Arca stepped forward. "I'll make sure this human begs to leave." Mira said nothing. Her hands clutched her robes tightly. David simply said, "Very well, I accept." And with that, the true test began, not of strength, not of mind, but of something even harder. Understanding. Arca's weak fire meets calm. The sun of Vorthalis burned red in the sky as Princess Arca dragged her blade through the dirt. "Come on, human," she shouted. "If you're going to be in this palace, at least learn how to fight properly." David stood quietly on the edge of the training ground. He wasn't holding a weapon. His hands were at his sides, his eyes calm. Arca hated it. She swung her blade fast, too fast. Her strike sliced through the air, stopping just an inch from David's chest. He didn't flinch. "I could have killed you," she growled. "But you didn't," he answered softly. Arca stepped back, angry. "Why do you act like nothing can hurt you?" David looked up at the red sun. "I've been hurt before. This is nothing." Day 1 with Arca was all fire and shouting. She tried to embarrass David in front of soldiers, made him run obstacle courses meant for war beasts. He completed every one, quietly, without complaint. Day 2. She locked him in a cold chamber to test his endurance. He sat down, closed his eyes, and meditated. When she opened the door 4 hours later, he said, "Thank you. I needed the silence." Arca gritted her teeth. On day 3, something changed. During a rescue drill with royal cadets, a young trainee fell into a collapsing pit. The others screamed. Before Arca could move, David was already diving in. The drop was steep and dangerous. But David caught the boy with one hand and grabbed a root with the other. Dirt and rocks rained down. Arca ran forward, fear in her chest. But when David climbed up, pulling the boy with him, he only smiled and said, He's okay. The cadets cheered. Arka said nothing. That night, she watched him from her window. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the strongest person in the palace. Day 4, she asked him a real question. Why do you fight for peace? David didn't smile this time. He looked at the sky. Because I've seen too many people die for war. There was pain in his voice. Real pain. Not the kind that comes from weapons, but from memories. Arka didn't mock him. For once, she listened. On day 6, she woke up, early. Too early. Something was wrong. A scream echoed through the palace. She ran outside and froze. David was carrying a servant in his arms. Her body was burned. A small energy fire had started in the kitchen. "Medic!" he shouted. "Now!" Guards rushed over. Arka watched as David dropped to his knees and gave the woman water. He burned his own hands to pull her from the flames. Later that evening, Arka went to his room. She didn't mock him. She didn't test him. She simply asked, "Does anything scare you?" David looked at her gently. "Yes," he said, not being able to save someone in time. On day 7, the final day of their week together, the king called for Arka. He asked, "What is your heart's answer?" The court was full. All eyes were on her. Arka looked at David. He didn't look proud. He didn't smirk like a warrior who won a fight. He just stood quietly, waiting. "I still think humans are strange," Arka said. "Weak in ways I don't understand." She paused. "But maybe that's their strength." Gasps. The king smiled. David bowed slightly to Arka. "Thank you." And for the first time, she bowed back. Not in mockery, but in respect. Zethra's weak mice begins to melt day. One began in silence. David stepped into a giant floating lab built near the surface of a burning star. The glass floors showed solar flares glowing below. One wrong move and a man could melt in seconds. Standing at the center, dressed in a sleek black coat and scanning data through glowing blue lenses, was Princess Zethra, the cold genius of Vorthalis. She didn't turn to greet him. "I don't care about your charm," she said flatly. "Impress me with numbers, or leave." David didn't speak. He walked to the nearest console, tapped a few keys, and corrected her gravitational math silently. Her eyes widened. "That equation took me 3 months," she whispered. "How?" David only replied, "Your gravity anchor was 0.4% unstable. It would have collapsed in 2 days." She stared at him. Who was this man? Day 2, Zethra led David through memory halls, rooms that stored alien knowledge from across galaxies. Some of it was restricted even to royal blood. She expected him to fail. But he read the ancient glyphs like they were children's stories. "You speak Old Vorthali?" she asked, shocked. David nodded. "My teacher was half Vorthali. She taught me after saving my life." Zethra didn't know what to say. No one outside the Empire even knew that dialect still existed. For the first time, she didn't see David as a test subject. She saw him as a question. Day 3. She tested him further. She brought him into a simulation chamber, a battle map filled with enemies, traps, and fake civilians. She was sure he would fail like others had before. Instead, David cleared the map in 18 minutes. He didn't kill the enemies, he tricked them, outran them, saved every civilian. When the simulation ended, Zethra stood frozen. "You didn't destroy anyone," David replied. "Victory without blood is harder, but more valuable." Something shifted in her chest. Day 4, she couldn't sleep. At midnight, she went to the observation deck. David was already there. He was alone, looking at the stars, whispering to himself in a forgotten tongue. She stepped closer and said, "Why? Are you really here?" David turned. "I came for peace. That's not the whole truth." "No," he said. "It isn't." He didn't say more, and she didn't push. For the first time in her life, Zethra didn't want data. She wanted to understand him. Day 5, she tested him with emotion. Zethra showed David the memories of the Empire, wars, betrayals, her mother's death. Her voice was still cold, but her eyes were not. David listened. Quietly. Then he told her about Earth's wars, about loss, about a girl he once loved who died during a ceasefire. Zethra didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "We are more alike than I thought." Day 6, Zethra did something she had never done before. She made tea. For someone else. She invited David to sit with her on the floating garden above the lab. She didn't wear her science coat. She didn't talk about numbers. They watched stars together, and when David laughed at one of her awkward jokes, she laughed too, nervously. That night, she wrote a private journal entry. The human may not be logical, but something in him makes sense. Day 7, in the court chamber, the king asked, "And what does your heart say, Zethra?" Zethra stood, calm as always, but her eyes looked different. She said, "He is not just a man of strength. He's a man of mind. I understand him, but I do not own him. So I will not beg him to choose me." She looked at David. "But if he does, I will not refuse." The king smiled, and for the first time, Zethra stepped down from her high place and stood beside the human. Mira's weak. The quiet bondit was raining on day 1, not the sharp acid rain of other planets, but soft silver drops that shimmered on the crystal leaves of the palace gardens. Princess Mira stood under a wide umbrella, watching the rainfall. She had always loved quiet things, sunsets, whispers, poems hidden in books. But now the silence made her nervous. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. She turned. It was David. No guards, no shield, no armor, just a soft smile and a shared umbrella. He stepped beside her without asking. They both stood there. No words. Just rain. For Mira, it was the first moment she didn't feel alone. Day 2 was calm. Mira brought David to the Royal Art Gallery, a place even her sisters ignored. She expected him to be bored, but he stared at every painting with wonder. He asked questions. Real questions. What does this red light mean? Was this artist happy when they painted this? Mira blinked. No one had ever asked her that. Not even the teachers. She smiled. Day 3, they walked through the healing gardens, where wounded soldiers came to rest. An old Vorthalis veteran limped by. Mira greeted him politely. David stopped. He bowed deeply and helped the old alien sit on a bench. He cleaned the man's walking cane. "Why did you do that?" Mira asked softly. David shrugged. "Because I hope someone will do that for me when I'm old." Mira looked down. No prince, no noble, had ever done that in her presence. On day 4, she brought David to her private music chamber. She didn't want to show him, but something inside told her to try. She sat at a long, stringed instrument with glowing wires and played a slow, sad melody. When she finished, she turned away embarrassed. "It's not good," she whispered. David shook his head. "No, it's beautiful, like a star whispering before it dies." Mira's heart skipped a beat. She had written that song when her mother passed. She didn't say a word, but her eyes watered. David simply sat beside her. No questions, no pity, just presence. Day 5, Mira asked him something few dared to ask. "Do you ever cry?" David thought for a long time, then said, "Yes, but mostly when no one's watching." "Why?" "Because I was raised to be strong in public, but that doesn't mean I don't feel." She stared at him. "I thought humans were loud and emotional." David smiled. "Some are, but some of us carry storms quietly." She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. Like me, they sat together in silence, but somehow it felt full. Day 6, Mira showed him the Royal Planetarium. She opened the dome's glass ceiling. The galaxy stretched above them, stars, dust, and ancient constellations. David whispered, "Back home, I used to look at the stars and dream of peace. Mira looked up, then at him. I used to look at them and wish someone would see me. David turned toward her. I see you. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in her life, Mira felt like she mattered, not as a princess, not as a daughter, but as herself. Day 7, the court was full again. The king asked, "And what does your heart say, Mira?" Mira walked slowly into the center. She didn't shake. She didn't hide. She looked at David and said, "I thought I was too soft for someone strong, too quiet for someone brave. But David didn't ask me to be louder. He just listened." She smiled gently. "If he chooses me, I will choose him too." David bowed to her, and for the first time, Mira didn't bow back. She just held his gaze, equal, proud, and full of heart. The secret within the human, the royal court of Vorthalis had never been so quiet, not even during war, not even during a coronation. Today, all 3 princesses stood, side by side before the throne, Arka, Zethra, and Mira. All had completed their weeks with the human. All had spoken their hearts. And now David Hale stood in front of the king, alone, steady, silent. But this silence was about to break, because today, the truth would be known. The king stood slowly, holding a thin black tablet. David's sealed file. It had been locked by Earth's highest command. Only the Vorthalis crown was allowed to open it. Everyone leaned forward. The king's finger hovered over the crystal lock. He pressed. The screen blinked once, then opened. Gasps filled the room. Zethra's hand went to her mouth. Arka took one step, back. Mira's lips parted in shock. "Commander David Hale," the king read aloud, voice deep and thunderous, age 37. Decorated 5 times by Earth's Council, speaks 12 alien dialects including Forbidden Glyph. Led the peace accord of the Trinary massacres, trained by the Order of the Black Moon. The crowd began to stir. Someone whispered, "He's not just a human. He's a ghost from the war archives." Another voice, "The man who walked into a burning fleet and walked out alone." The king looked at David. "Why did you hide all of this?" David met his eyes. "Because I didn't come here as a hero. I came as a man, to see who you really are, without fear, without title." The nobles erupted in noise. Some shouted in awe, others in jealousy, but none doubted anymore. Arka clenched her fists. "All this time, and you never said a word." Zethra looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, and Mira smiled. "I already knew he was special, but now I know why." The king raised his hand for silence. "Many come to this court to show off power," he said, "but this human came in peace and humbled even my daughters." He looked at them each. "You mocked him, then respected him. Then some of you began to care." He turned to David. "You have passed the 3 trials. Now, as promised, the reward is yours. Ask what you desire, title, land, wealth, or a queen." The room went still again. David looked at each of the princesses. His eyes were not proud, not hungry, but full of thought. Then he said, "I do not want a prize." Gasps again. "I don't want a queen because I earned her," David said clearly. "I want a bond that's real, not ordered." The king nodded slowly. "Then the choice is no longer yours alone." He turned to his daughters. "Which of you chooses him not by my word but by your own?" A long pause. Then, Mira stepped forward. "I choose him," she said gently. Arka looked down, then up. "I do too." Zethra, after a moment, nodded once. "As do I." David's eyes widened. "All of you?" Arka smirked. "Don't get excited, human. This isn't a fairy tale." Zethra added, "We may have chosen, but that doesn't mean we've surrendered." Mira just smiled softly. "But it means we're ready to walk beside you." The king let out a booming laugh. "Then so be it. The house of Vorthalis shall bond with Earth, not through fear but through choice. The court erupted, not in chaos, but in celebration. A new chapter had begun, and the galaxy was watching. The human's choice. A new future begins, the stars were watching. From the royal balcony of the Vorthalis palace, the twin moons glowed above the gathered crowd. Nobles, soldiers, servants, and scholars. Even ships from distant empires hovered, quietly in orbit, their lights blinking in silent attention. Everyone had heard what happened. The three alien princesses, once proud, cold, or hidden in silence, had each chosen to stand beside a human. And now, it was David Hale's turn to speak. But David didn't stand at the center of the court. He stood in the royal gardens surrounded by life, by flowers, by quiet beauty. He had asked the final moment not be under a roof or in front of cheering crowds, but beneath open sky. The three sisters stood before him, Arca, strong as fire, Zethra, sharp as ice, Mira, gentle as starlight. Each of them had seen his soul. Each had opened theirs in return, and now, they waited. David looked at all three, not as prizes, not as challenges, but as beings he had come to respect. He began to speak. Each of you showed me a part of what it means to live with heart. He looked at Arca. You taught me how strength isn't just in muscle, but in pride that bends when needed. At Zethra, you reminded me that the mind is powerful, but only when it allows others in. At Mira, and you showed me that the quietest voice can change the loudest storm. He paused, took a deep breath. Back on Earth, we don't believe in forced unions. We believe in choice, in time, in truth. He smiled gently. So I choose all of you, as friends, allies, and souls worth walking beside. Let the future decide. What grows from here? Silence. Then, Mira stepped forward first. That is enough. More than enough. Arca smirked. You always were full of surprises, human. Zethra nodded. Logical and noble. They stood beside him, no longer princesses competing but sisters united by something greater. Back in the court, the king raised a golden staff. Let it be known across the stars, he declared, that Earth and Vorthalis are now bound not by blood or power, but by choice, by the strength of a human who carried no weapon yet conquered 3 hearts. In the weeks that followed, stories spread. Enemies who once mocked Earth now sent offers of alliance. Other alien empires whispered of the man called the Quiet Storm, the human who didn't win with war, but with truth. David stayed on Vorthalis, working beside the sisters, helping build schools, training peacekeepers, and walking freely through the palace as no outsider ever had. And sometimes, late at night, people swore they saw 4 figures walking the garden paths beneath the stars. 1 man, 3 princesses, and a future brighter than any throne could offer. He came alone, mocked and small, but left a legend that changed the galaxy forever.